And we're back. Sorry about the delay in the schedule here. We had some power problems in the media center, but now we're on the road again with new, fresh electricity. Renewable, we hope, of course. So the next session here that we're now entering into is an intriguing topic. The world needs China, and China needs the world, is the title of this session. And we're going to watch a video initially here that's titled, Can China Save the World? That is the intriguing title of a recent talk given by the professor Lola Woetzel. She's from New York University, Shanghai, and we'll be able to watch it very soon. You might be surprised to hear such a question at COP. China is, of course, a major carbon emitter. Since 2005, it has been emitting more greenhouse gases than any other country, and now emits about twice what the United States is emitting. On the other hand, China is sometimes called the world's factory, and it's a reason for that, of course. Far more manufacturing happens in China than anywhere else, and Chinese products can be found everywhere you look. And this is true not only of electronics and consumer goods, but renewable energy technologies, batteries, and of course EVs. So China now leads the world in all those industries. And as we know all too well, we're going to need a massive amount of those products in a very short amount of time if clean energy transition is to be a success. So in short, no country but China is really making and deploying what we need for climate change mitigation at anywhere near the scale that is necessary. So, the question is valid. Can China save the world? After this video, we're going to hear from some guests who can shed light on this question. But first, watch Professor Woetzel's talk.
Climate change is a market failure. You can figure out your daily carbon footprint, and you can start putting a value on it. Can China save the world? 谢谢大家。很高兴啊，跟你们呢有这个机会交流一下，把我们的可持续性的研究。我今天来讲的就是英语啊，可是如果你们有什么问题啊，可以提，这是中文的。所以我的题目就是中国跟全球的世界有什么关系啊？把这个1.5度的一个挑战，所以或是我们英文来说 ，Can China save the world? I think China would like to save the world. Can it do it? And what kind of challenge do we have here? How many of you know this game, have seen this movie? Anybody recognize it? Yeah, this Squid Game. So it's a very scary movie, right? It's a movie where we start off with hundreds of people and we eventually get down to one. And that's kind of the climate challenge right now. We're starting off with billions of people and eventually we may get down to one. And it's going to play out over the next couple of decades. So you get to be part of this game. And the question is, what kind of chances do you have? Are you going to make it through this game? Who's going to win at the end of it all? Who's going to get the big prize, which in this case is basically survival? Let me explain what I mean. So we have to do a lot of stuff if we want to get out of climate change. These are some of the examples. We need to have 3 billion electric vehicles on the road by 2050. 3 billion, with a B. We need to have 2.5 billion heat pumps by the year 2050. We have to have about 120 times the amount of carbon capture that we have today. We need 8 billion tons per year of low carbon steel, chemicals, ammonia, fertilizer. We need about 7 times the amount of renewables power that we have and 4 times the total amount of power. 4 times. We have to build 4 times the energy system of what we have today. Times 4 again. That's a lot. And finally, we need about 100 times of what we've got in terms of clean hydrogen. And we need all of this in the next 20, 25 years, which in energy system terms is tomorrow. Guess who has to do this? You. Because basically all this stuff is made here. 60% of manufacturing of clean tech capacity is in China. Where 90% of solar panels and wafers, 60% of wind turbines, almost all the batteries, the LFP batteries, fuel cell trucks, hydrogen electrolyzers, and so forth. So if anybody is going to solve this problem, if anybody's going to win this game, it should be China. Because we're in video, I wanted to show a few pictures. So last year, China installed about 260 gigawatts of solar power. The rest of the world combined did about 160. So China installed about 6 times the amount of solar gigawatts as the rest of the world. And that's up, of course. China used to install about 25% of the new capacity. Now it's more like 60%. China's certainly doing well there. If we look at wind, similar numbers. China installed about 74 gigawatts of capacity last year, and the rest of the world combined did something like 40, and the US did about 5. The climate revolution is happening here. Electric vehicles, China sold 8 million electric vehicles last year. I hope everybody here, if they don't buy one, will buy one soon. They're very cheap now. The rest of the world combined did 5 million, and the US did 1. China's looking pretty good. But here's the thing. We're just getting started on all of this. We've done less than 10% of what we need to do if we want to win the game. The good news is, we can do stuff like solar scaling. We grew solar production by about 12 times between 2005 and 2015. So we took whatever was in 2005, multiplied by 12 to get to 2015. So we can do something like that. And we need to keep doing solar like that. We need to 7 times the solar capacity that we have right now, same for wind. But there are other things which need even more. We look at batteries. We need about 80 times the amount of batteries here. We need 20 to 30 times the number of EVs. And then we have the stuff we don't even really know how to do. So hydrogen, we need about 160 times the amount of green hydrogen that we have right now. And then there's things that we just are clueless about, like carbon removals, 150 times that. So our challenge is to take what we've got now and just grow it really big for a long time. That's our challenge. Now, China's good at these kind of things, right? China's good at big stuff. We like doing big stuff. The problem is that this is big stuff, but it's not really very profitable. So here we have the issue is so anything in the red is in the red. It's not profitable. And anything in the green is attractive. And as you can see, there are a few things in the green, some types of solar, some types of wind, but most of it's in the red. Now, the good news, if you look at the slope of the lines, this is showing the difference between 2020 and 2030, is that it's coming down. So we're getting better. But still, this is not necessarily a profitable thing to do. So China likes to do big things, but it likes to do them when they're profitable. So how do we get profitable? That's the core of it. If we can make this profitable, then we can do it. If we don't, then should China save the world? But you don't get a choice about that. Carbon doesn't really stay in one place. It goes all around the planet. But yeah, this is our real issue. Is only 10% of technologies are in the money today. Even when we see what's going to happen on the technology front, the costs are still not where they need to be. So solving this is basically going to require us to become really, really good at scaling up before it gets profitable. We're going to need to find ways to get ourselves bigger, even though we're not making as much money in the short term. Because we know the only way to really lower the cost is to get bigger. So as we scale, as we get larger, we get cheaper. So batteries, solar, hydrogen, heat pumps, wind, we see this trend everywhere. But we have to get bigger first. And that's our real issue. So we need to find ways to get bigger. And this is where, can China save the world? Can China, China can't save the world by itself. China has to save it with the rest of the world. I don't know a single Chinese company that isn't trying to chew high right now. I think that's our challenge, is how do we work together with the markets, the opportunities that we have around the world to collaborate, to get bigger so we can make money and we can deploy this stuff so we can save the world. That's the only way out of all of this. And that's going to take money. We think that the total requirements for financing of the green technology revolution is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 to $4 trillion a year globally. That's a very large amount of money. Today, we're spending maybe $1 trillion a year globally. And almost all of that is a subsidy. We need to add another $2 to $3 trillion somehow. And we need it in power, we need it in mobility, we need it in buildings. And that's, again, not going to come just from China. That money is not, some of it is, but not all of it. Most of it is sitting in the United States and in Europe. So if we are going to create a new energy system, we're going to have to do it together. We're going to have to find the sources of wealth that are going to, in their own interest, fund this technology. Because if they don't do it, well, maybe that wealth won't be there either. So it's really in the world's interest to work with China. And it's in China's interest to work with the world. So what's going on here? Why isn't it happening? It doesn't seem to be. Well, I'm going to close with 3 remarks. The first is that economists would say climate is a market value to you. Do you see the climate in your paycheck? Can you put your number on the value of the climate in your retirement? And now, of course, what happens if you don't have climate? Well, you may not have a retirement. So that's what a market failure is like. So we know it's important, but we just don't consider it. We just don't have it as part of our economic equation. So we need to build an equation that includes the cost with the carbon, the offtake, with the money. So that's the first thing. And we need to do that all around the world. So I think the single biggest opportunity that we can all do is start to think about how, for us in our companies, do we put a value on our impact on the climate? What are we doing? How do we know how much it is? How much carbon do you consume every day? How many people here know how much carbon they consume or generate? You can get that, you know. Alibaba can do it for you. So you can figure out your daily carbon footprint, and you can start putting a value on it. And you can make yourself your own personal source of climate saving the world. So China saving the world starts with you, today, now. That's what we have to do globally, of course, not for just people, for companies, for countries, for places. And yeah, of course, some places are going to have more opportunities than others, and we need to connect those. So when we talk about supply chains and global, I always get frustrated by the conversation about security. Because everybody says, well, security comes first. Well, I don't know about that, honestly. I mean, climate security is national security. If you have a smoking wreck of a planet, you're not very secure. So go look at Venus. It's not a really attractive place to live. So that is, I think first. Climate comes first, and the planet does not care about our politics. So we need to do this globally. So that's the first point. Second point is we need to do it now. If we don't scale this up, even before it's profitable, we are not going to make it. Again, the climate doesn't care about our politics. Math is math. You will find it. It will happen to you. And, whether it's floods or fires or drought, living in a hotter, wetter world is no fun. So we're going to have to find a way now, and we are already experiencing what it means to have a hotter, wetter world. Let's try to bring down the cost before we can even get at scale, and even if we can't bring down the cost, let's start deploying at scale. So how do we build then the execution capability? How do we build 6 billion, I think it was EVs, 3 billion EVs. So, I mean, that's a massive execution capability, and I think China, of course, has a very specific role to bear there. China can really do a lot of that. 我们的政府的比如说 implementation capabilities 操作性比较强. So that is a second point. We can't wait on this. We have to go now. And then finally, this idea of saying, well, you know, all of this stuff, it seems to be subsidized. It doesn't seem profitable. The government is doing it all. And I'm sorry, government just doesn't have that much money. The $1 trillion that we're spending a year, that's about it. The government is not going to spend more than that, because otherwise your taxes will go up a lot. And anyway, your prices will go up a lot anyway. Your electricity prices are definitely going to go up. So how do we find ways to tap in to the private wealth, what we call blended finance, to de-risk the business cases and put the financing into those critical technologies before they break even? And again, I think this comes back to the idea that climate is a market failure. Because what is all that money worth if you don't have a planet? Now, if you're a long-term investor, if you're an insurance company, and you're supposed to invest your money for the next 30 years so that your policyholders will get money back in 30 years, you have to think like this. You have to think about what is the asset that I can invest in today that will still be there in 30 years, and it won't be underwater, or it won't be burning. That's climate risk. So somehow we need to take that observation, saying, well, this is a very real risk, and we want to reduce that risk. And we're going to reduce that risk by investing in safe green technology, and that's going to cost money, but it's worth it because it reduces that risk, and that's how we're going to finance this. Well, that system hasn't yet been developed, and I think China can again save the world by developing it. China has the world's largest carbon markets. China's carbon markets are entirely separated from the rest of the world. There's no connection between anything that happens in China and carbon and investment and anybody else in the rest of the world. This is practically the definition of a market failure. There are many, many investors outside of China who would be very happy to have access to the Chinese carbon markets. And the Chinese carbon markets could and should be put together so that they can create an even bigger investment opportunity. So that's just one example of how China could save the world by creating an interactive investment opportunity globally, right here in Shanghai. So I think to sort of work together and apply to the Shanghai Green Finance Society and work with the Shanghai Climate Exchange to start making that happen. Because this is what it's going to take. You guys are going to have to get engaged. And with that, China can save the world. So thank you very much.
This was truly a very inspirational speech from the New York University professor Lola Woetzel, and we have some guests here to discuss this speech, and we're delighted to introduce, I have with me Qinyi Xu, researcher at Peking University, and you're also associate at GF60, that's the Green Finance Forum 60. And we have next to you, you have Ingmar Rentzhog, the CEO and co-founder of We Don't Have Time. And Jessica Transek, you are a professor in the Institute for Data, Systems and Society at MIT. Wonderful to have all three of you here in the studio. So let's start with you, Jessica. Your research focuses on technology, innovation and scalability. And you listened to the talk, I'm sure you heard it previously, but also, of course, the rapid deployment that we need to have on solar, wind and batteries in China. So what is China's capability and capacity of scaling up renewable energy. What does this really mean for the world?
Yeah, so China has shown a remarkable capacity to sort of scale up production of a variety of clean energy technologies. And, I think that has allowed them to sort of come in at the right time and then grow their market share, their dominance of clean energy manufacturing. You see this in electric vehicles and batteries and solar panels and increasingly in heat pumps and wind turbines as well. And so it's interesting, though, when you look back at the evolution of these technologies to sort of understand the picture. And what you see is that have contributed to where we are today. So if we just take the case of solar energy, you saw that policies early on in the 70s and 80s in Japan really led the growth in that market. And then that was followed by policies in Germany, and not just those countries, but many other countries as well. And then China. And these were policies that encouraged market growth and adoption within those countries. Now, who is manufacturing the hardware for these installations of clean energy projects and, electric vehicles and so forth? That's a different picture. What you've seen is that China has been able to come in as these technologies have improved and, sort of riding on the market growth stimulated by public policies in other countries primarily. And then, in more recent years, China itself has been adopting a lot of these technologies. But at the same time, they've adopted industrial policy that has allowed them to manufacture the hardware and at large scales and then supply the global market. So it's a more complicated picture than just China alone having gotten us to where we are now. It's many other countries and taxpayers in many other countries that really grew the markets. Then companies came in and competed for market share, and a country like China really supported the growth of its own domestic manufacturing efforts at sort of the right time in order to then take over dominance of these markets.
Thank you, Jessica Tranchek. I'm turning now to Ms. Xu. Could you please tell us a bit about the GF60 network? It's on.
It's on. Oh, thank you so much. I think that the GF60 is now currently doing a lot of work which is related to green finance in China and also internationally connecting to other countries, because they also have the collaborations with different agencies, including non-state actors, and also with some very active participants that are from different groups, which also from some social content. So GF60, I think it aims at to connecting green finance and also in a broader term, because as we understand that green finance includes different actor kind of like contributions. For example, there are some motivated by the government-driven. Some are organizational-driven, because right now, for many COPs that I attended, for example, multilateral development banks are a very important actor that should be emphasized with green finance, and they are promoting it. So this year, they also just released their joint statement towards how to accelerate green finance and green finance reforms, as well as there are private capital driven, right? So I think what GF60 is aimed at is to connecting these three all together, because we know that blended finance needs collaborations from all different actors towards this, not only the effort from government, not only the effort from organizations, and not only the effort from private. However, as we know that we have come through a long way towards now, for people to understand better towards green finance, towards renewables, towards how can we accelerate and put more efforts into the kind of like contribution towards combating climate change. So now the work is that how can we motivate more in private funding, kind of like private finance. And I think for GF60 and other organizations as well, it is now to associate different actors together in order to alleviate kind of to reduce the kind of the worries that they have in more fundings, but to give them like more potentials to collaborate on this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shu. Turning back to you now to you, Jessica, I'm coming back to you, Imar, soon. What can the rest of the world learn from the example of China's velocity here in the clean energy sector and scaling up technologies? What could we learn from China?
Yeah, well, so there's actually more predictability in these technology trends than we actually, than we often realize. And so if we look at, again, coming back to the case of solar, just as an example among this set of clean energy technologies, as I mentioned, a lot of the work in developing these technologies happened in other countries initially, and costs had already come down quite substantially through the efforts of companies globally, and also importantly through taxpayer support in many countries for market expansion policies that drove the markets for solar, even when this technology was not quite competitive yet with other sources. And then at the time when the technology was quite cost competitive, that's when China came in and started to incentivize manufacturing domestically and also grow their own adoption of this technology. And we see this with the other, essentially with many, the story is different for each technology, but you see this example with many of the other technologies I mentioned as well. So what can other countries learn? Well, you really need to pay attention to these technology trends. See, how are costs coming down? Is this a technology that's improving more quickly, more slowly? We can actually identify the mechanisms that lead to cost improvement. And it's not only about costs. In the case of lithium-ion batteries, you care about what's called the energy density. How much energy can you store per unit volume, per weight of a battery? You can pay attention to these trends and actually be strategic, much more so than many countries are being in their industrial policies, to support investment in manufacturing, in innovation, and the right kinds of investments at the right time to increase your chances of succeeding as a major player in this global marketplace, this evolving marketplace where we are seeing a clean energy transition. I mean, it's not happening fast enough
Indeed.
to draw down emissions, as quickly as we need to see to really protect our planet, but it is happening. That's unquestionable at this point.
Jessica, China's carbon emissions have soared, and they keep soaring, even though the country has really scaled their production and their installation of renewables. So how do we look at this policy-wise from the perspective looking into China, and what could we learn from this?
Yeah. Well, of course, I'm not privy to conversations happening within that country, but what we are seeing is that they've pursued what I can see from the publicly available data is that they have pursued scaling up renewables, solar and wind, also investing in their power grid and investing in other clean energy technologies, electrification of transportation and so forth. But they've also pursued scaling up of coal-fired electricity. And as many of us know, coal-fired electricity is the most carbon-intensive electricity. It per unit energy delivered in the electricity sector, it contributes the most carbon emissions, which is not good for climate change. But they've done this to meet growing energy demand. This has been the strategy that they've pursued. I'm not saying this is the right strategy or any commenting on anything about that, but it is what we've seen is the scaling up of clean energy and also of the capacity to combust or burn coal to produce electricity. And that has been the way they've supported growing energy demand. But what we're seeing, and you're sort of maybe starting to see it this year, is that maybe the clean energy is really starting to take over in terms of possibly leveling out the emissions and maybe even, maybe not setting a new record in 2024. It's too early to say. So, what do you need to actually drive emissions down? Well, what you need to do is to stop combusting as much fossil fuels, or if you are combusting it, capture all of those emissions and store them away for, essentially many hundreds of years to ensure they don't leak out again. what we've seen in recent years is that China has been combusting increasing amounts of fossil fuels, so emissions have been rising, but they've also been growing that clean energy capacity. It'll be really interesting to see this year and the years to come if that increase in the combustion of fossil fuels slows down or even level out, doesn't increase this year, if we can start to see that emissions curve going in the other direction, namely falling, which is what of course we need to see globally, and we're not yet seeing at the global level either. It's not just China, but overall globally, if you put everything together, China, of course, contributes substantially, but we saw a new record high in carbon dioxide emissions in 2023. And then looking forward to other countries, you have to pay attention to the fact that less wealthy countries would like to grow their energy demand and their modern energy services to support economic growth. Hopefully that can come from clean energy sources, and also the growing demand we're seeing from AI. Hopefully that can also be served by clean energy sources.
Thank you, Jessica Tranchek. And it's a great segue to Ms. Xu here, because you do focus a lot on the needs of the African continent when it comes to renewable energy. So what can you tell us about what's happening from the Chinese perspective in trade and et cetera in Africa?
Thank you for this question. I would think that from my own perspective, because we see a lot of progress also happening this year with September just and the China and the African Summit, kind of like opening a new era of the collaboration between China and Africa. So many presidents has came, and also there has been many things that has been elaborated since the kind of like what has been happening in the previous time. So what I have noticed is that first of all is continuing and growing investment in Africa with renewable energies, including a lot of like terms like solar, wind, etc. And the second thing is that a very important aspect is with the early warning system. The early warning system, which is also in accordance with UNFCCC's kind of like the calling for early warning for all. And I think in that aspect, China is really supporting a lot in Africa for to build up the kind of like warning system, early warning system. As we know,
elaborate early warning system as in
adaptation is more like a kind of like
yeah.
disaster management thing, because
so floods, hurricanes, etc.
Yes,
climate-related weather.
Yes, yes, because we know that at the current stage is a very important point that we should notice is that now we have emphasized a little bit like too much on mitigation worldwide. However, because we already know the importance of mitigation and we are striking for like more support towards mitigation. However, adaptation has long been something that was like less concentrated on. However, early warning system and early warning is something that are like so crucial to those most vulnerable states, right? Especially for those like small countries and those most vulnerable states. So for many African countries, that is the case, that they really need support in that circumstances. And thirdly, I think what is quite important is about education and training, because after all, we need people to conduct things, right? So except for the kind of like, except for money, technology, and then certain support in those like technical terms, for example, the early warning system that I just mentioned. Another important thing is like the transferring of kind of like improving of the kind of like education and trainings. So I heard that there has been a lot of like trainings that was initiated in China so that African those like African technical officials, and they are receiving the certain trainings in China, and then they can bring up the certain knowledge back to the continent in order to finish the kind of like the equipments and also better equipping themselves with the knowledge towards how to better adapt to those like disaster management stuff. And I think for these three areas, they're of crucial importance.
Thank you, Ms. Xu. Turning now to Ingmar Rensock, CEO and co-founder, We Don't Have Time. You have a strong track record and background in finance, apart from communications. So what is your take on how we work with China and the world works with China in regards of renewable energy?
I think we can do better. The way I see it, the reason, I mean, we had it in the keynote here, just we listened to before. Many green solutions are yet not profitable enough, and countries like China are, subsidizing this development of new solutions, and now we're seeing that they're becoming profitable, and that's something we should be very thankful for. But Europe and US, and mainly Europe and US, I will say, they are reacting on this like, oh, it's unfair. Let's put some tariffs on importing those tech from China, so that our industries we have at home will survive better by not taking up the competition of becoming greener. I mean, this is some kind of nationalist way of protecting status quo, and I think it's all about protecting the fossil fuel subsidized system, because the problem is not the green subsidies. The problem is not that the governments are spending money on developing green tech. The problem is that $7 trillion per year is spent on fossil fuel subsidies. So if it's something we should have tariffs on, is it the countries that have high spending on fossil fuel subsidies? If we remove those subsidies, the game will be totally, completely different. So I think we should put tariffs in the same corner as we put fossil fuel subsidies. So probably the fossil fuel subsidies are going to get up even further. We must stop this. We must cooperate on the green transition. If now China are very good at producing batteries, I think that Europe can produce something else in the green transition that we can sell to China. Let's buy the tech from one part of the world that we use, and we can do, we don't need to do everything locally. Of course, there's a lot of good things to produce things locally for sustainability as well. Of course, we should need to do that, but we shall not penalize countries that are spending money on making tech cheap. I don't believe that's the way forward.
Thank you, Ingmar. Curious to hear your response to this, Jessica Trensick. What are your thoughts on what Ingmar just said about, the fossil fuel subsidies and the protectionism?
Yeah, well, I think that, what we see from the case of Chinese manufacturing of clean energy is that there is a way for many countries, and not just China, to identify areas of improvement that we can expect to see going forward in different clean energy technologies. And this can start with the actual technologies themselves. Is it about driving what's called material intensity down, using less material per watt power conversion? And this is something that we saw in solar panels, for example. Is it some other mechanism? A lot of what we need to see going forward is a reduction in installation costs of hardware in the field. So many countries can actually participate in this clean energy transition. The train has not left the station. I don't think that's the case, but you really have to be strategic in targeting mechanisms that will improve these technologies, that will allow you to be competitive in a global marketplace. And there's no question that competition at the global level does help drive faster innovation. So if you have firms competing at the global level, then the one that outcompetes the others is going to offer, that competition is going to improve the overall service, drive costs down. The one that offers the best service will gain market share. That's how it works. Now, of course, there are various other factors at play, and protectionism is something that is rising, so we need to keep that in mind. But I did want to highlight the example of Denmark briefly, because if we look at, again, this history of clean energy technologies, you see that many countries, through their support of clean energy market expansion policies, also research and development. So the U.S., for example, has been a major player in funding research and development in a variety of clean energy technologies historically, including solar panels and wind energy and many others. But if we look at Denmark, they had both strong market expansion policies to encourage the adoption of wind energy at home. They also managed to turn this into an advantage in terms of manufacturing and producing wind turbines and wind turbine siting technology that is allowing them to compete on a global scale with Vestas and Ørsted. And so it's not just China that has made this model successful. I think Denmark, in the case of wind energy, is another one. And so I think there's a role for everyone in this transition.
We need everyone.
What's
sure.
that?
We need everyone for sure.
Well, and it's just such a major change to our economies that, and we're just not there yet. I mean, we have only, again, to look at emissions to see that how much has to change and growing energy demand and so forth. So, I think sometimes the defeatist talk that I hear coming from, I think, there's so much more to do in this space. And if we focus on innovating toward the benefit of society, there's just so much that many different countries and many different companies can do.
Thank you. Over the years, Western media has expressed concern about environmental standards and also working conditions in manufacturing industries in China. So what do you all think about this? The issue of balancing the needs to accelerate the energy transition and those other concerns that has been addressed in Western media for many years. Any thoughts on this? How do we look at this? Would you like to start, Jessica?
Well, I mean, I can start, but I would love to hear from others, just to say that, the clean energy transition shouldn't come at the expense of other aspects of our society that we care about. And there's really no reason for it to do that. But we do need greater transparency, greater global cooperation, more just upfront, honest conversations. But the clean energy transition can offer many other benefits as well in terms of more equitable access to quality jobs and good working standards and so forth. Anytime there's change in an economy, there's an opportunity to do things differently. And that's how I see the clean energy transition.
Ms. Xu, would you like to add any added perspective here?
Yes. So for energy transition, green energy transitions, definitely I think it's included that and recognize that for China as something is incorporated in its strategic planning. So it has already become something that is inside what is going to be in the coming few decades. And regarding to those different standards, because I noticed that there are different concepts and standards and understanding towards how energy transition should be pursued. It's because for energy transition, it's something that has been recognized by people just in the past few years, and then we're trying, I think, global wide to have that concept be better understood. So how can we better understood that process? How can we get to a just energy transition process, right? So I think everyone is working on that, and there are new concepts, new understandings coming up every year. But I think the direction is the same, that we are all trying to pursue the energy transition through a just and fair and also a good manner, which is equal to all. And for that situation, I think, first of all, different countries do have different circumstances. And secondly, is that different countries are pursuing that according to their pace and understanding. And thirdly, I think from a scholar aspect, we're trying to produce more knowledge to help both the audiences from the general public as well as the government officials to better understand this process. So that is what we are doing in academia. And I hope that not those different concepts, being created this year are confusing people, but are actually helping the government as well as the public to better understand how energy transition should be pursued.
Thank you, Michelle.
you.
Well, that's one of the reasons we gather here at the COP, of course, to meet each other and discuss the possibilities and also the challenges. So before we end this session, would any of you like to add? Maybe you'd like to add on this topic too, Ingmar. Otherwise, let's focus on the opportunities here ahead. And if you want to mention anything about the challenges, go ahead. Ingmar.
I can just add that I believe that we can't fix the planet while destroying humans. We must also be better at social responsibility. And there's different standard in the different parts of the world, some better, some worse. And I believe that global corporations that are from the part of the world that have better standards on human rights, etc., if they trade with other countries, they will export and they will demand that the suppliers are complying with this. So I don't think we are creating a better world by stop trading with each other. But of course we need to, if we are a brand and I have a supplier in another part of the world, I need to make sure that they represent the values of the company. And I believe that if we trade with each other, and if we demand change from each other and learn from each other, the world will be a much more peaceful place and it will be much faster going green. And regarding competing, of course we should compete of becoming as green as possible. Some countries, some regions are doing this by policy changes, regulating. Some countries are doing it with subsidies. I think we need to do both, but if someone else are speeding up faster, we're not competing with them by putting tariffs on it. We're competing with them by doing the same thing. We have the US Inflation Act. Europe needs to step up our government spending on the green transition. So let's compete here. Let's spend more money in the green direction and less money in the fossil fuel direction. That's what I think we need.
I'm getting a signal here that we have to finish, but Jessica, say a few words on the opportunities, please.
Yeah, no, and I think I've really enjoyed the conversation, so thank you. And I just wanted to say that, I do think it's important to highlight that through trade policy, countries can absolutely make their priorities clear in terms of human rights and overall environmental sustainability. And the conversation shouldn't just be, and the policy shouldn't just be directed at addressing climate change. We should do all of the above and really use these policies to put pressure on suppliers of equipment, of services for this clean energy transition to support environmental sustainability, human rights, and, a big part of that, closely linked with that, interconnected with that, is addressing climate change.
Well, we need to work together, that we know for sure. Thank you very much for joining us. We need to move on to the next panel. Thanks again and best of luck with your work. Thank you. The We Don't Have Time Climate Hub live from Baku during the COP29. And we just had this fascinating session with the title, Can China Save the World, related to the speech with the same title. So I'm happy to have some new guests here in the studio to dig even deeper into this topic. And with me, next to me here in the studio, I have one wonderful guest, and we're going to talk more about China's remarkable abilities to scale and innovate in the clean technology space, which is outpacing any other country in the world. However, as we heard, China cannot do it alone. We need climate collaboration to make this the world's largest economy better again together. So next to me here, I have Chen Jiao. You're director and head of ESG at Jinko Solar. Wonderful to have you join us here in the studio. And on Zoom, we have Danjing Zhu, Director of Water Resource Department, IVL China. Welcome to our broadcast. And also on Zoom, Christian Thompson, President Alfa Laval, Northeast Asia. Good to have you with us too. So, Mr. Chen, let's start with you. We heard a few minutes ago that more than 90% of solar wafers are made in China. So, what is China doing right in this respect, and what can other countries learn from this?
Thank you, Katerina. Indeed, solar is a long supply chain. Along the supply chain, we have like solar polysilicon, like wafer, ingot, cell, and solar module. Indeed, it's not just 90% on the solar cell, but along the way, all supply chain, China has a dominant, in the capacity global. And aside from the solar panels, like today we call the new trial of China, EV and lithium batteries. It's all green solutions that China provide to the world towards net zero. So back to your question. So what is China doing right? So I gotta say, China, there are a lot of facts. For instance, China have the world's most complete supply chain, manufacturing chain. That is one. So China have a skill up, technology breakthrough, talent strategy, etc. But what I want to say is that I think the most important thing is that we have the 2020, we have launched a policy called carbon neutral, carbon peak by President Xi Jinping. So after that policy announced in the last 4 years, we have seen tremendous growth among all sectors, renewable energies, educations, and you can see that, and that is, I guess, determined that today we have a very big, strong on renewable investment as well capacity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So solar energy is surging rapidly, but as the professor said in her speech, we need to do it even faster. So what do you think is needed to strengthen the collaboration between China and the rest of the world to speed up this transition? Because again, we need to do it together, right? Sure. And what obstacles do we need to overcome to make this happen?
It's a very challenging question, honestly. Yes,
but important.
Yeah, very important. Because here you see we are in COP29, right? So everyone here, and we have our own responsibilities. In UNFCCC, we have a principle called common but differentiality, responsibility. For China, it has the role and the responsibility to become the world, the solution provider to the renewable energy, to the solutions. And for the other rest of the countries, they have their own responsibility and positions. For instance, some of them provide advanced technology like AI, some of them provide advanced technology like fundings and the market. So everyone needs to in this game and contribute towards net zero rather than just China can save the world. Only China cannot save the world, but it's a joint together work and towards a net zero transition. That's my answer, maybe. Yes, thank you.
So we can be strong in different areas and sort of help each other along the way.
Indeed, that's how we can fight the climate change and get the final result. Only if the game is played by one, it's not a game. It's not.
Definitely.
It's not a challenge. Yes.
It's not the Squid Game that she showed us. That was a bit terrifying. So from the IVL perspective, you've been active in China for about, let's say, 40 years. Is that correct? Please tell us about your work in China.
Okay. Yes, EV China has been in this Chinese market for more than 40 years. Actually, our work can be divided into three parts. Firstly, we are working on research, and secondly is this kind of consultancy work. And actually, we put lots of effort on this education on environment and sustainability. So that, but no matter which part of this. For all these three parts, we are always trying to make it to provide the solutions which is sense-based, holistic, and comprehensive solutions. So we have in here, we actually have different kind of projects. We can call like funded by different authorities. Like we have this EU funded projects. We also have this Swedish-China cooperation projects. And we have funding from the Chinese authorities. We also have funding from the private enterprises. So that's our main work here. So we are trying to use our knowledge to provide us like a environmental friendly solutions for our clients, no matter for this research or for this consultancy. That's what we are doing here.
Thank you very much. And again, just to clarify, it's the Swedish Environmental Institute. So maybe people might be confused by the acronym IVL, but that's the full name of it, the organization. So
yeah.
Speaking about acronyms, the LCA analysis that you are conducting, can you tell us a bit about what that entails and how you work with this in China?
Yes, we're working a lot on this life cycle thinking, life cycle assessment, short for LCA.
Mm-hmm.
You know that this is kind of like how to say, it has been widely used in the European countries for many years, and our organization, IVL Research Environmental Research Institute, actually is one of the oldest, the earliest organization to join involved in this life cycle thinking. We involved in this standards development, and we also involved in this implementation rules, something like that. And in China, in recent 5 or 10 years, we started to do this LCA. Both in research and also in this consultancy. Especially for this consultancy, we have help our support our clients here in China to do this environmental performance evaluation using this life cycle assessment tool. So we have helped our studied products involved chemicals, construction products, and plastics, aluminum, and so many kinds of products. We found that this life cycle assessment is a very useful tool because it's not just focusing on the manufacturing part. And we talked, I heard the discussion before. There are I think a very important, key question, key issue is that we put a lot of effort on the manufacturing. Use this life cycle thinking, we take consideration from the raw material extraction until the product's manufacturing, and also we consider the end of life treatment of this product. So it can avoid to we do this kind of local improvement, but actually we just transfer this environmental burden to another stage of the product. So it's very powerful and also useful tool.
Indeed.
Yes.
So are there any specific challenges working with the LCA process in China?
I would say that this life cycle thinking had already, it has been been widely used for several years, but it's still in a developing stage. Especially in China, we just it is just applied in recent 10 or more than 10 years, but the Chinese government actually has promoted this life cycle assessment and the life cycle thinking into both the policy level and also the action level. I'm not sure if you heard that. Our government just released this carbon products carbon footprint calculation requirements, something like standards. Actually, that is based on this life cycle thinking. So this is one challenge, and another challenge is like that. When we're doing this calculation, we need lots of data to support our calculation. So sometimes we cannot collect every data on site. we need some data set like secondary data from the database to support our calculation. But there are the data set like have very good time, technical, and also geographic representative of China is still lack. This is a big challenge in practice.
Thank you.
But
sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this even though life assessment is not that widely used in China, but I can see that more and more not even though only the government, but also the enterprises already recognize this useful tool, and they already started to learn knowledge about it and trying to apply it and try to develop the local representative data and also tools.
Thank you.
Yeah,
so
that's all.
can you see any trade-offs between, I mean, we need to scale this climate solutions, but of course we also have to make sure that we don't destroy the environment in doing so. So how can we make sure that we're not, by encouraging the speedy processes of the scaling, that the environment is harmed in other ways, so to speak?
Yeah, I think we can. Yeah, if you go go through the history of Sweden's development, we can see that Sweden actually have on the one hand they have a very rapid development for this economic perspective. On the other hand, they also kind of achieve to the working reducing the greenhouse greenhouse emissions and the environmental. They are working also get some achievement on this environmental improvements. So that means that we can both pursue economic motion and also this environmental improvement at the same time. But the key thing is that when we're working on this kind of solutions, we need to think using this kind of comprehensive and science-based thinking based method. We need to think about at the beginning. We need to think about how to use this, make this resource efficiency. When manufacturing, we need to consider how to improve the production process to reduce the environmental emissions, and we should also considering how to reuse, recycle the material and energy, something like that. So through this way, we can both get the win-win situation, both on the economic and also the environmental perspective. And we have been in China for 14 years. We know this methodology, this life cycle thinking methodology is important. So actually last year we IVL cooperate with the Chinese Association and also this Chinese crisis and EU and the Sweden stakeholders. We launched a life cycle thinking initiative. What we want to do is that promote this life cycle thinking in all our in our practice.
Okay.
On the one hand, we can keep our and more people thinking. We want to keep stakeholders at the same line. We get some same line. So
thank you.
Right now we already have 12 working groups, which they are vehicles and batteries, rolling stocks, renewable energies, and so on. We hope
thank you.
Working step by step and cooperate with our partners, stakeholders from the different countries, different industrial sectors. We can work. We can contribute our to this environmental and
thank you. Thank you. So turning now to our next guest, Christian Thomsen. Alfa Laval is a Swedish company. You're active in many places and in many different sectors. So you've been operating in China for more than 30 years. So tell us, what does Alfa Laval do in China? See if we get some sound on Christian, because we can't hear him in the studio.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so thank you. We're a global Swedish company. We're a little more than 140 years old, and we're world leading in technology and equipment supplier for we're world leading technology and equipment supplier in separation, heat transfer, and fluid handling for the energy sector, for shipbuilding, and for food and water industries. And we have been in China actually for 40 years, and we have a complete setup in China. So what we do as a group, we also do in China. So in fact, today, 20% of the total business activity we have is in China, and 18% of our total employee base, that's approximately 4,000 employees, are Chinese. So China has become, the single most important business destination. So what we do in China is the same as we do in other places. We provide innovative solutions for energy efficiency in established industries. And then we also enable clean energy transition. That could be to hydrogen, it could be with heat pumps, carbon capture, and it's in decarbonization of the shipping industry. So to be more specific, I could mention 3 examples which are related to what we have done in China. So our technology have been used in the north of China, where it has helped 7 million people in the city of Tai'an to get winter heating and also clean air in the city by reusing the waste heat from the local power plants, which are located 70 kilometers away from the city. If you look at the skyscrapers in China, 60 to 70% of those skyscrapers, they rely on our heat exchangers for efficient heating and cooling. And Shanghai Tower might be known, but that's just one example. And then Chinese shipbuilding, we support today with state-of-the-art decarbonization solutions. So the largest facility we have in China, which is up in Qingdao, is the ones that deliver these solutions. And then last month, the world's first methanol boiler system was delivered from this factory to COSCO Shipping, so a Chinese ship owner and shipyard group. And here you can say we're collaborating to position Chinese shipbuilding as also becoming a decarbonization leader. But that's through a collaboration between us as a foreign company and Chinese industry. So that's what we do in China.
Those are quite big projects you're mentioning here, and affecting millions of people. Impressive. So, Christian, in terms of solutions, it's come to my notification that you've just launched a new solution at the China International Imp. Is that the methane, or is there anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, no, that's true. We were just at CIIE in China generally. So we took the opportunity to do something we had not done before. So we did a global product platform launch first in China, and then the rest will then come, the rest of the world will come. And this around the heat exchanger called the T25. I decided to do so because it's a product that plays a crucial role in radical scaling of clean energy, and that could be hydrogen, but it could be heat pumps. And it also is important in improving energy efficiency at large scale and volume in established sectors. So heating and cooling, heavy process industries, power production, stuff like that. And then thirdly, we have the importance of China. So for us, it looks like key reasons. It's the scaling up, which is there's a lot of talk about that. It's clean energy and energy efficiency, and then it's the general importance of China. So what we do with the T25 in China, if you look at hydrogen production, it's really important to bend the cost curve. And here, one of the key issues is efficiency. And the T25 heat exchanger is essential to achieve the required energy efficiency. With conventional technology, you lose approximately 40% of the energy as waste heat, and the T25 can be a solution to recover that waste heat and turn it into something useful. If you look at IEA, they point out that we need a 6-fold increase in energy storage by 2030. That's 1,500 gigawatt on a global level. A big part of that energy storage has to be in China, because you have this increasing amount of solar and wind, and with the intermittency, you need energy storage to have a reliable grid. And the T25 is designed to support that growing need of energy storage. So this technology is critical for making renewable energy a dependable part of everyday life in China. Also in other parts of the world, but now we're in China here. And then finally, urban heating and cooling in China and elsewhere, most of it is still fossil fuels. One way of making progress is to deploy industrial heat pumps, so they can be an enabler for decarbonization. Heat pumps use low-grade heat from data centers, from industries, from other sources, and we can convert that into carbon-free heating. The T25 is a perfect match for large heat pumps, so not just the regular heat pump you have at home, but industrial scale heat pumps. And then we can turn waste energy, or waste heat, into a valuable carbon-free heating source for cities in China.
Truly inspiring.
So that was why we launched it at CIA. Yes.
This is truly inspiring. I have one last question to you, Christian. It's about the collaboration between China and the rest of the world. What could you say about that in a few sentences? What is needed? Because we need to do this together to scale, right?
Yeah, I think the overall learning we have, not just from China, but from everywhere in the world, is that it's partnerships. We believe in partnerships. Partnerships in China, and I would say that has not so far been the easiest part of the equation. Some of the world's most advanced technology companies are hosted in China. So for us, it's natural to explore the opportunities for partnerships also in China. It has been highlighted by a few of the speakers and also the keynote that the world is to some degree still separate, whether it's carbon markets, technology, collaboration, geopolitics. But if we are to overcome the challenge, we need to collaborate and we need to cooperate. We think we have something to bring to the party. As a Swedish company, we are a technology provider and a knowledge provider, so we have something to bring to the party. So to accelerate and scale the clean energy transition, it's vital that we across the world, in Europe, in the United States, in China, we partner up to accelerate and scale the clean energy transition in China. So
thank you.
To put it shortly, what I want to do here is to collaborate with Chinese companies, Chinese partners, but in particular Chinese institutions. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Christian, and thank you all the guests, the rest speakers here on this panel. This has been truly inspiring to listen, because we need to do this together, we need to work together, and we're many countries in the world that need to collaborate to getting this right and getting it right in time. So thank you very much for joining us, viewers and also panelists. So let's move on.
Thank you.
And we're back, and I have Ingmar Rentzhog with me in the studio. Ingmar, with your strong background in finance, and you've been part of this Chinese session, and you've watched it from the sidelines here. What can you say about what are your thoughts?
I mean, it's obvious we need to have all parts of the world playing along. And now when US, we don't know what's happening with US, it's more important than ever that everyone else in the global community unites more, not less. And I think we have so much to learn. we need to keep doing that, and I think it's important to share all perspectives and see where we have the most things in common to keep pushing, keep going. If we can't run, let's crawl, that Al Gore said earlier today.
So collaboration is key, and any thoughts that you have from your perspective in making this happen from the financial perspective, because that's really where your background is, and the ability to get money in the right direction here.
Yeah, I think what's key, and also where that was discussed here, we need public money and we need private money, and there's a challenge to get green tech profitable, green new way of doing things, green business model profitable, not in the long term, but in the short term. So if we get public money into it, we also get governments involved, creating long-term rules that will get the private investors to trust that this is not going to be changed in the next election, etc., and then we do the investment. That is actually what I think we're going to see now in US, where we still have the US Inflation Act. The effect of the US Inflation Act will continue even when Donald Trump will enter the White House again, because you get this collaboration between public money and private money.
And procurement is key here, of course.
But in order to get that to happen, the public money needs to go first. The private money will never lead, they will follow. So I think we need to get this happening, not just on a national level, not just in big regions like Europe and Asia. We need it to happening on a global level, because if we are dependent on each other, public, private, and in different regions, we will create an ecosystem that will be a win-win to continue to do. And we're not really there yet, but that's where I hope that we can get this ball rolling.
Well, thank you very much, Ingmar Bensog. And now let's move on.